Okay, perfect. So hello everybody. Thanks for tuning in to today's lunchtime talk. I'll just give it a second I can see lots of people joining us now. So welcome and thank you for coming. So today we're going to be talking about women silversmiths. Now, in normal times, we have a fantastic gallery of metalwork at the Millennium Gallery, and within it as well, a temporary display that shows the history of women silversmiths called She Wields the Hammer. But sadly, you can't see it at the moment as our sites are closed, which also means that we are losing vital income. So we are extremely grateful for any financial support. And if you like today's talk and you like to make a donation, you can do this at museums-sheffield.org.uk/donate. So today we're joined by Emma Paragreen, who is Curator at Sheffield Assay Office. Hello, Emma.
Hello.
And just a reminder that we are live right now. So if you have any questions at all, please do feel free to pop those in the Facebook comments box below, and we will have time at the end to send over a couple of questions to Emma. So I think on that note, we're about ready to make a start. So Emma, I will pass over to you to begin.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to Museum Sheffield for working in partnership with us and vice versa to be able to bring a little bit of this information to you this afternoon. I'm the Curator, Librarian and Archivist for the office, and I've been in post here since 2006. So I was working with the exhibitions curator, Lucy Cooper, on She Wields the Hammer, and it was this initial research that we did that went into this exhibition. So if we could have the first slide, please, Jess. So for those of you that don't know much about the Assay Office, it was established in 1773 as an Act of Parliament, initially to assay, which means to test, and to verify the type of precious metal. And initially, they only hallmarked silver. This was then followed by gold in 1904, by further amendments in 1975 to test and hallmark platinum, and more recently in 2009 for palladium. As you can see here, we've had many buildings across the city. The first there is on Surrey Street, moving to Fargate, then to Portobello Street, and then now where we are in Hillsborough. We've been on this particular site since 2008. May I have the next slide, please? So for this talk, I was looking at the archives that the office have acquired over this period of time. And I've used specifically the Assay Office register, day books, registration cards and databases. And just to give you a little bit of background about these particular archives that we hold and records. So the Assay Office register is this book, which is condensed just here, which is a blue book in front of me. The actual one is currently on loan to Museum Sheffield and is on display in the gallery. So the Sheffield Assay Office register has a list of names of all those individuals that were working in silver, and it was a requirement that they registered their mark. They called it a maker's mark, which invariably was their initials, surrounded by a shield shape, some description, or what we call a cartouche. And this was then marked into the ledger, into the book, alongside their name and typically their address or their work premises at that time. So these records hold quite a lot of detail about individuals and where they were located in the city, and sometimes a little bit about their specific role, mainly silversmith or plate worker, for instance. This document that you can see here is a day book. So these are all stored down at Sheffield Archives. They still belong to the Assay Office, but they're under the right temperature and humidity controls. And these particular books that you can see here in front of you, it's not too clear, but basically these show the date along the left-hand side, followed by the company that is sending in the work. Then it will detail specifically the item that has come in for assay to be tested, and then did it pass or fail, and how much. Sometimes it will tell us the weight, and then it will tell us the the price that was paid for the assay and obviously the quantity, and then was it collected and taken away. We've followed on from the registers and day books to having computerized systems. So we have things such as registration cards, and we have a database today with all our registered makers, of which there are over 3,000 on our system at present. So what I was going to do with this is take the information. I was interested specifically in women's silversmiths to coincide with this exhibition, but also in general, we didn't really know a lot about women's silversmiths and who was actually registered. And I thought, as we celebrate today, well, on Monday and this week, International Women's Day and International Women's Week, that we should highlight some of these names that are often hidden in these pages of beautifully handwritten documents that perhaps very few people actually see. So I'm going to share some of the findings. This is a 15 to 20 minute quick whistle-stop tour of women's silversmiths from past to present. So if we could have the next slide, please. So in the 18th century, what the archives tell us that there were only 4 silversmiths registered in this period. The first female silversmith listed in the Sheffield Assay Office register was an Elizabeth Middleton, who was listed in her own right as a partner for the firm John Hoyland and Company. So she was one of many. Their particular mark was J.H. and Co, as I described earlier as their maker's mark, and it was within an oval shape. And we can tell from our registers that on the 15th of September 1773, John Hoyland, John Trevor Young, Thomas Smith and Elizabeth Middleton were registered as that company. So this is the first female name that we see as a director. This particular item that you can see here is within the Sheffield Assay Office collection. So it's a few years after the firm was established, and it is a sugar basket, very beautiful, quite intricate. It's got a blue cobalt glass liner, and it's beautifully saw pierced, all the lines that you can see. And then on top of that is cut in these ribbon swags, and then on top of that, these are engraved. So it's got this beautiful handle that's hinged as well. So it's a very delicate piece, and that sits within our early collection. And that was incorporated into the She Wields the Hammer display down at the galleries. It's not to say that during this period that silversmithing firms did not employ women. It's just that many of them were not registered in their own right with their own maker's mark. So it really is quite unusual that we see Elizabeth Middleton referenced. Many individual archive records of individual firms will have employed women in many parts of the processing of silverware manufacturing. What we need to remember at this time in Sheffield, we're talking about cutlery, flatware and hollowware. The next entry is not for a further 7 years, and this was on the 4th of May, 1780. And there was a lady called Mary Kirby. And it's so sad that we don't actually have pictures of these individuals. And I do hope that given time, I may be able to do some more research. We won't be able to get photos, but find out a little bit more about these people and where they lived. So there were no partners in this firm. It was just herself. And she was described as a plate worker from Brinsworth Orchard in Sheffield, and her mark M.K in a rectangle. I have yet to find any of her work. It'd be interesting to know what collections or individuals hold these pieces. The next was 1792. In the May, a Hannah Watkinson was registered, a plate worker on Silver Street, funnily enough. And for those of you that don't know where Silver Street is, it's below the cathedral and sandwiched between Campo Lane and Broad Lane. It's a small little street cutting between some student flats and a car park. Doesn't look very silvery at the best of times. And her registered maker's mark was H.W in a rectangle. However, a year later in 1793, a William Watson joined her and the company became HW, so kept her own initials, and Company. So she was obviously joined forces. And a further union of this 18th century period to round off these 4 only women silversmiths was Samuel and Anne Fox. We don't know if they were brother and sister or husband and wife, but possibly more research will will unveil these. Could I have the next slide, please? So here we're going to jump into sort of the 19th and into the 20th century, and I've put quite a typical image here from Walker and Hall, 1906, and this comes from our library, which is right behind me today, and this is one of the catalogues marking what they did within their firm. It's a typical image of women silversmiths within their works, and you can see on both of these are all women. Sometimes you see an odd gentleman in the background. The image with all of the ladies stood along the side, the benches, they're working on spoon and fork. This is the buffing rooms, and directly behind them are the trays of the cutlery and flatware. And the next picture is the passing and polishing room. So you can see the women again on benches with the light coming through the window, where they can be doing some of the work and looking very carefully. And down the centre of the room is this massive table with a huge number of wares. And these are being looked at very, 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 very carefully. What we find around this time is, and it still happens today, that many of the women undertook these particular jobs because they've got good dexterity with their fingers and attention to details. So sometimes there's nothing sexist about them doing some of these jobs, it's just that they were very eloquent at doing so. Within this period, certainly within the 19th century, there were only 11 women silversmiths registered. And it was not until 1890, so we jump a huge period of time. And there are another female silversmiths listed, and she was called Gertrude Brown of Globe Works. So those of you that know Sheffield, you've perhaps seen this building on Penistone Road, and her mark was GB in a rectangle. By the 1890s, firms registering within Sheffield were coming from further afield. And this is because initially the Assay Office only took registrations from people within a 20-mile radius of the town, as it was. And as the town grew and then it became a city, people were allowed to register from further, and you could register with more than one assay office. So this particular person in the 1890s sort of broke the trend, and it was 1893, Elizabeth James Fairburn, and she was the first registration to come from London. Into the 20th century, it appears at the turn of the century, the majority of firms were run by men. So as we go through looking through these archive records for women, we can then see all the gentlemen and what sort of roles they had and what roles women had. So they're not just telling us that there were silversmiths, but it's also telling us the jobs within them, within these factories. The first entry of women was on the 13th of June 1910, and it was an Ella Gladdy Gibbs from Bristol, and she was in a partner in a firm called Kemp Brothers of Union Street, Bristol. So we're covering more and more of the country now. Further entries followed in 1910, a Mary Byrne, a Mary Jackson and a Winifred Morris, and these were listed as directors of the firm John Byrne and Sons Limited, and they were dealing in silversmithing and jewellery at this time and had premises in Liverpool and Hatton Garden in London. And Hatton Garden was known typically for the jewellery trade as well. And the 24th of November 1910, Fenton Brothers, this might be more familiar with those of you that live in Sheffield, Fenton Brothers Limited, and they were on Southmore Works in Sheffield. And the list continues. So just prior to the First World War, we have two female business partners, Margaret and Elizabeth Sinclair Lorry, and they were based in Glasgow. Mrs. Mary Scott Dykes. We see as well firms being passed from male to female. And here we see a John Barker was being passed the firm to Mrs. Joan Dixon of Sheffield. We also see firms coming from Edinburgh, further ones in Sheffield, Bolton and Birmingham. So all business centres known for metalworking. May I have the next slide, please? What we do see, certainly from the 1920s, even more females as partners in businesses. We also see many more women as directors. And we also look at this sort of period as well, after the First World War and then into the going into the Second World War. Certainly that First World War period, we know that men went off to fight and many women took over some of those roles. But sadly, many of those gentlemen died and didn't come back. And hence we do see in the records where women have then, it has passed from husband to wife or within family members, or they have recruited from further afield. So there was this progressional, despite there being a decline in the items that were being made and often no need for some of these luxury items. We do see these partnerships being taken over by women. So to just give a couple of examples, Fenton Russell and Company, there was a lady called Elizabeth Douglas who took over that firm. Miss Rosalie Marks was a proprietor of A. Marks and Company in Manchester. Another name for Sheffield, which many of you may be aware, is Hawksworth and Eyre, and one of the directors was a Miss Agnes Smith. Collishaw is a name many of you may refer to, known for pen and pocket knife making. And here we see an Emile and a Ruby Berwick, who were based in Sheffield, running that company. Emile generally tended to be a gentleman's name, not Emily, but certainly Ruby was the female partner in that. Walter Trickett, that they're known very famously for cutlery, hollowware and flatware. And here Walter Trickett passes the firm over to Ada Trickett and it becomes EB and Company. A particular one that I wanted to mention was JB and JR Himsworth. This was registered in 1925, and I will come back to this particular name of Himsworth as it features quite heavily in the collections of both Museum Sheffield and Sheffield Assay Office. And a final one to mention of the 1920s was Harrison and Fisher and Company. And it was run by Mrs. Inman was the director and Agnes Fisher. So sometimes, you know, it's not until you look into these documents that then you actually begin to realise that behind the main name that were lots of women with quite senior positions. Into the 1930s, we see lots of sort of the increase of the college and arts and crafts. And it's in the 1930s that the Arts and Crafts School of Sheffield and some of these guilds take off. So not only do we see their tutors being registering the actual colleges themselves or the groups, but then their students follow in pursuit. So one of the first students to come on board was a lady called Maria Sutherland, and then there's a flurry of these in the records as they start to come through. Through the 1930s and 40s, we see lots of art schools, and at this period we see Rotherham, Chesterfield, Norwich and Leeds all appear in the registers under their art schools. And we see today that some of these pieces at auction, they raise quite high values once they've come through. And often we authenticate these through our records for some of the antique dealers and the auction houses. The College of Arts and Crafts registered in 1935, and it was a Marjorie Ibbotson and a Mary Davy who were listed at that point. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I said I'd come back onto a lady and gentleman, it was father and daughter, and this particular mark is of Joyce Himsworth. Now, Joyce Rosemary Himsworth was born in Sheffield in 1905, and from very early on worked with her father, Joseph Beeston Himsworth. I don't know if you can just see there one of the marks, it's JBH, and then we've got JRH beneath it. So this was a mark they registered jointly in 1925. And she worked with her father and they established their workshop in Sheffield. However, just a year later, Joyce began to use this mark on some of her work, but she also became an independent designer, silversmith, working mostly to commissions in her own studio. In 1935, she registered the mark JRH, both at the London Assay Office and Sheffield Assay Office. As in the 1930s, she was studying at the Central School of Arts and Crafts under the tuition of H.G. Murphy in London. She was not a prolific maker, working mainly to commission. However, a pair of vases and 2 chalices can be seen in Westminster Cathedral, and a silver and gold peace cup made for the Britain Can Make It exhibition. She took part in many exhibitions of the Goldsmiths Company at home and abroad, and taught at Rotherham and Chesterfield art colleges, which we're most fortunate to see. She retired in the 1960s, and an exhibition of her work was held at Sheffield City Museums in 1978. Fortunately, she passed away in 1990, but we are left with a legacy of pieces that are held not only between the Industrial Museums Trust, Sheffield Assay Office and Museum Sheffield, and in other private collections. So here you can see a saucepan that was made, it was beautifully hand raised with an ebony handle. Here is a coffee pot, which is within the collections here at Sheffield Assay Office. And this beautiful piece of jewellery, she can make very intricate pieces. And this is a 9-carat gold tie pin with some filigree work and a cabochon of citrine set there, which is a beautiful piece, all hallmarked accordingly. So some of the pieces have featured here in exhibitions and in Museum Sheffield. So when the doors are open again, you'll be able to hopefully see some of her work. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I talked a little bit about the rise of the arts and crafts and people studying. So we can see here in the 21st century, we're seeing the Sheffield Arts and Crafts Guild. The rise in arts education is seen throughout the records, and this continues in the 1950s. Some firms were more male dominated than others, some females as directors, but women were beginning to register in their own right, be this as a hobby, business associated with schools, colleges, arts and crafts. And this continues throughout the 1960s. We also see in the records that more secondary schools and colleges come on board, such as Leeds, Pudsey, Southport, Manchester and London. And the famous one known as Sheffield College of Art on Salter Lane, we see that registered in 1964. And as I said earlier, we see not only their tutors, but then a flurry of students at the beginning of each academic year, which is always quite fun to see. So you know which are the tutors and the students. We also then see from the Salter Lane site, the Sheffield College of Art, which then becomes the Sheffield Polytechnic, and now what we know as Sheffield Hallam University. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, again, we see lots and lots of students registering. The Sheffield Assay Office at this period ran many design competitions, which were won not only by men, but also by women. And certainly within our collection here at Sheffield Assay Office, we have a lot of pieces that represent women's work dating from 1973 right through to the early 80s. And I hope at some point, we have displayed them in the past, but I hope that we can do that again. So we've got things like tea caddies made in silver and rosewood, got some beautiful boxes, trinket boxes, and these are all bicentenary awards or marking the Silver Jubilee year of 1977. There were quite a few students, certainly women, that then came and did sort of apprenticeships with the Assay Office. And one particular lady was known as Sue Lauday, and she continues to make today. But she made some boxes, a condiment set, and also some 18-carat gold cutlery. And these have all featured at Museum Sheffield in a variety of exhibitions over the years. So hopefully we'll get to see those in due course. May I have the next slide, please? So the Sheffield Assay Office has not only supported Sheffield Hallam University through their metalwork and degree programmes, that's BA students and MA students. They give them materials and prizes, so that the final year can actually work in precious metals. And I have to say, over the last few years, there have been mainly women, not just on the course, there are men, but mainly women have won a lot of the prizes. And this can be cash or materials. And the Assay Office has supported those over the last 25 years. And here you can see 2 participants, past participants of the Starter Studio programme at Yorkshire Art Space. This is another programme that the Assay Office has encouraged, and since 2002 kitted out and has supported through commissioning and tools and equipment. And for 2 years, graduates from studying metalwork and jewellery to continue their practice and set up their business. And I worked out recently that over the 20-year period, the Assay Office supported, or this particular programme has supported 34 female silversmiths and jewellers on this course who have gone on to be commissioned to make items. And then through this programme, they have then displayed their work mainly through Museum Sheffield and the Assay Office. So if you've ever passed through the foyer, you will have seen some of their work. So I thought what would be nice would be to go back to the registers and say, well, Sheffield Hallam University is registered as SHU, and Yorkshire Art Space, all the participants on the programme, they all have their own registered mark, and this is free of charge. And they are given free hallmarking whilst they're on the programme, be that degree or of the 2 years at the Starter Studio programme. So I thought what would be nice to finish with today is to actually show some of their achievements, which are very, very rarely seen with you. So if we could have the next slide, please. So the largest piece that was commissioned by the Assay Office is this one on the side of the building. I don't know if you have seen it, anybody, but certainly during lockdown, if you go to Hillsborough Park, cross the dual carriageway, this is something that you can see. It's not behind closed doors. It's a large-scale rose mounted on the side of the building. It's made of stainless steel, copper and fine silver at the end of each of the petals, and it's called White Rose. And this was a lady called Yunko Mori, she's Japanese, was based in Manchester and now works from her studio in Wales. And her work is sold through major London dealers. And a piece of her work was in She Wields the Hammer, one of her smaller organism pieces. But do come and have a look. It's the largest mixed metal commission after there were changes in the hallmarking law in 2008. The piece next to this is a Mandale lime cone that you can see, and each of those plates is for serving petit fours or macaroons. Looks very good with macaroons. Beautifully hallmarked. This is made by Victoria Radcliffe in 2017 as a precious little gems commission. I wish to thank all the people that supplied these images, mainly photographed by Jerry Lampson, Hazel Drummond, Museum Sheffield and Sheffield Assay Office. If there's anybody I've forgotten, I do apologise. The next piece in line is, we call it the Skyline of Sheffield, but its actual official title is Little Sheffield. It's the base of it represents the rivers, and then on the river are many of the industrial buildings that are important in the city, both historic and present. So this was made for the Sheffield Assay Office in 2014. This is Jennifer Ricketts, and each of the chimneys now holds a rose, showing that the clean air rather than the industrial air. But we've got the old and the new Assay Office. I think the Millennium Galleries and Winter Garden features on there, as well as the Cutler's Hall and other important industrial buildings, including the sadly lost cooling towers of Tinsley. Just below are 3 pictures, again, all by women. We've got Colette Bishop, she was on the Starter Studio programme, and she created these liqueur beakers, and she uses repousse and chasing work to shape them. And then they're beautifully gilded inside. So no doubt you will have seen some of her work. The middle one is a cup, a necklace and a ring, and it's called Decadence. This is by Maria Hanson. She's a senior reader and lecturer and programme manager at Sheffield Hallam University. And this piece is displayed alongside the Millennium Punch Bowl, and it's one of the punch cups in that sequence of work at Museum Sheffield Millennium Gallery. So do go and have a look at that. The final piece was another commission by a lady called Annette Petch. She uses the same techniques as Colette, chasing and repousse work, and she made this beautiful silver and gold dog rose necklace with all handmade chain. May I have the next slide? Some have moved away from Sheffield, but most of them are still around. So you do see them, and most of them are based down at Yorkshire Art Space. Here, with this glass bottle that you can see, is a little stopper and a holder for it. And this particular piece was made by Josephine Gomersall in 2018. Again, another Yorkshire Art Space commission by the Assay Office to create something quite industrious and thought-provoking. And she produced this piece in sterling silver, 18 karat gold, and she set some little diamonds into the honesty petals, so it just catches the light. Next along from that is Francisca Unamar. In 2019, she presented us with this murmur. It's a water jug and cup, and it's a beautiful, playful piece, and the texture on the surface is beautiful, and it's been captured beautifully there with the dark and the light shining on it. But it's a piece that's about 30 centimetres in height. We haven't used that particular one. Some are used, some aren't. The next one is quite a playful piece. It's based on sort of lunar landscapes and sun and moons. And it's made by Nina Ritalia. And this piece is actually within Museum Sheffield's collection. And it's a salt and pepper pinch pot. So if you can't quite reach it, you just spin it and you can then get to the dish that you need to. So it's sterling silver and gold plate in this instance. And the last two pieces that you can see here are recent commissions. Now, we had hoped that had the museum been open and we hadn't had COVID, that these would have been on display at the moment. But we hope that in May you will be able to see them. Holly Susanna Clifford has taken her piece and created basically a play on an old Cruet set. So she's called it a Sheffield contour map condiment container. So you've got some English walnut. She's beautifully carved into this, made 4 little silver pots and this beautiful base for it. And Rebecca Joslin supplied her the spoons. And then on the top, just off to the side, there is a piece of eco resin, all painted in beautiful greens. And then on top of that is a 3-dimensional contour map, which is all marked with the place names. And as it sits on the top, it's marked up as to where everything is in Sheffield. So a beautiful piece. So that will be available to see hopefully in May within the foyer at Museum Sheffield. And alongside that, we'll join her this particular piece by Helena Russell. And Helena Russell's piece is called Multifarious Candlestick, and it's patinated copper and silver, and on it there's a beautiful design of a Tudor rose, and it's all held together with leather cord, but it can be stacked in a variety of ways, and you can have one single candle holder or several, as you can see there. And joining them will be a piece by Abigail Asher. She's made some industrial looking silver. There's going to be a variety of materials, patinated and highlighted with different materials, napkin rings. So they'll all be available to see in due course. And no doubt there'll be a talk about them and a Q&A associated. So may I just have the last slide, please, Jessica? So today I talked about how many registered women do we have. We've certainly got some talent in Sheffield, but at the Assay Office, makers come from all over the UK. As I say, we have over 3,000 registered customers, and I'm proud to say that over half of them are female. And very proud that they choose to have their mark registered with us in Sheffield. Today's Silversmiths design and make their own work. They run their own workshops and they have teaching capacity, be that on a one-to-one. They hold workshops or within university and colleges within the profession. They not only do all of these things, they sell online or through fairs and galleries within the UK and abroad. And we're here to support them and they support us and make the world go round. I'm very, very proud of them all. Here is Rebecca Joslin and there's Jen Ricketts below at Elements up in Edinburgh. So if you want to go and support more of these women and feel inclined to dig deep in your pockets, I'm sure they would be delighted to hear from you. It's been an exceptionally tough year for many of the designer makers, be it male or female. And hopefully in due course, we'll see Goldsmiths Fair return to London. We'll have Elements in London, the open studios at Yorkshire Art Space, and Goldsmiths North here at Cutler's Hall in Sheffield in 2022. And we thank Millennium Galleries and Museum Sheffield for posting many of these displays to enable us to display this work that we commission and then hopefully donate and display. Look out for further work at Sheffield Hallam University. I know their degree show went online, which is fabulous, and again, very, very highly skilled young people. Look out for the Precious Little Gems in May 2020, the 2020 ones, which will be on display in the foyer at Museum Sheffield, Millennium Galleries. And we're delighted last week to announce a new commission for Georgia Clipson, who is our new Starter Studio programme participant at Yorkshire Art Space. And her work will hopefully, fingers crossed, be ready in December. So look out for that. There's plenty going on and exciting opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Thank you so much. It's really interesting to see how this industry has changed kind of over time, from being very male dominated to now having so many women involved and recognised, which is fantastic. So we have had a few questions come in. So if you're okay, I will just ask you a few of those now. So firstly, are there any plans to resume talks and visits to the Assay Office when restrictions are lifted? And when, please, will they be for groups only or for individuals?
Yeah, we do hope that later in the year we might be able to do that. At the moment, we're waiting on government guidance and guidelines. At the moment, we are currently closed to the public, but if anybody has any inquiries, etc., then please do get in touch. I'm certainly here a few days a month at the moment. But yeah, it is our intention to resume them. So do look out on the website, and all details about how to book and the size of the groups will all be on there in due course when we know.
Yeah,
thank you for your patience.
Next question is, why did people from outside Sheffield use the Assay Office? Was there competition between Assay offices?
Yeah, so we're all under this Act of Parliament, and we all uphold the British hallmarking system, but we are all separate businesses. And yes, there is technically competition. We're not allowed to undercut one another, but we can compete on customer service and turnaround time. Often the reason why people want to be registered with one or more than one office is it may be that you're making a range of different products, and certainly for Sheffield, a lot of people do want a Sheffield hallmark on a piece of cutlery, for instance. Other items they might not be so bothered about. Certainly with jewellery, the Birmingham Assay Office is often people's go-to option, just purely because of the expertise of marking jewellery within the jewellery quarter. And it may be that as a silversmith, you actually have clients all over the world or all over the country, and they often may request that a specific mark is applied. So you may be registered with more than one office, or that you have workshops across the country and it's just purely for convenience. So a variety of reasons.
Okay. Brilliant. And I think our last question here is, do you have a favourite object?
I do. I haven't featured it. I've got a couple. The one by a female maker is the Jen Ricketts piece, the Little Sheffield. It's got the old and the new assay offices. It's got all the wonderful buildings across the city, and the story behind it is wonderful. And she painstakingly saw pierces everything out. And then puts it all together, and she's so dedicated to her work. In terms of another favourite piece, if I can pick two, is actually by a male, and he's called Keith Tyson, and it's a rose bowl, and on the top it has 200 date letters, which you ordinarily would be, it would be illegal to have that, but they're all photo etched with special permission, and it was a gift from the Goldsmiths Company to the Assay Office to mark its 200th anniversary. And it's a wonderful piece. Yeah, to see something with 200 date letters on is completely unique.
Yeah, I loved all the contemporary pieces of silverwork we had there, because it's just quite interesting to see how people do different things with it as well. It's quite versatile, I suppose.
Yeah.
So fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that talk. That was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. And we've had lots of lovely comments from everybody who's been watching. So thank you. And I'm glad that you enjoyed it. And do keep an eye out for our other upcoming events. We've got lots more coming up. You can see that on our website, museums-sheffield.org.uk, or in the events tab of our Facebook page. I think next week we're doing a tour around the Sheffield Stories Gallery at Weston Park Museum. So keep an eye out for that. And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.